Fantastic. This is gonna be fantastic, Mrs. Barrio. All right, welcome to your very first book talk. Once a quarter, we do a book talk with Mrs. Barrion, and we come to the library. So we are in her office in the library today, and we're going to talk about the book of the quarter. So you've had the directions for the book of the quarter, and we're going to talk about all of that. But this quarter's genre is nonfiction. So I've given you the genres ahead of time this year, which we typically like to surprise you.
Yeah,
we unveil them, but we're in a weird world. So nonfiction, classical, canonical fiction, or nonfiction. I guess you could do old nonfiction if you wanted, and then reading out of your comfort zone, which is one of our favorites. And then the fourth quarter is read whatever you want. And I had a question yesterday. Someone said, do you really mean read whatever you want? And I said, yeah, I really mean read whatever you want. One of the things that Mrs. Barrion and I really emphasize with you is the importance of choosing books that you really like. We want you reading. We don't want you reading because you have to read. We want you reading because you really enjoy it.
You gotta find the joy in it. And if that's the one thing that you get from school, on some level, it's a success.
So this class is building you to be a better writer, but you can't be a better writer without reading. They go hand in hand. And the more you read and see other people's writing, it truly influences you and helps you become a stronger writer. So today, Mrs. Barrion is going to talk about some of the books that she loves and really good nonfiction. I know some of you had said you're like, I don't read nonfiction, I like fiction. My favorite is when you're reading nonfiction and you forget that it's true. Like Educated. Some of you picked Educated, and I'm like, this cannot be true. And so you just get lost in the story because really people's lives are the most fascinating stories. So today she's going to introduce, she's divided it into two categories, happy and sad, but there's some freaky going on too.
Well, I was wondering if I should keep them separate or intersperse them so you're not like, oh my God,
all so
these
depressed.
Books are miserable.
Yeah.
Or is this a joke? And so one of the things I think is most exciting about nonfiction books is it is incredible the wide range of topics. Like you think on some level like, oh yeah, I know, what nonfiction is, but I feel like there's a book on everything. And you'll see today what a wide range of topics. And that was, kind of one of the things that I wanted you to take away from this is think of something that you're interested in and let's try to find you a book about it. But I'm going to start with, and I did intersperse the happy and the sad. So I'm going to start with some of these and see what we find. And so I think a good one to start with, Malcolm Gladwell is a great nonfiction author. He has a bunch of different topics. This one I thought was really interesting, Outliers, the Story of Success. And he kind of talks about how did these top famous people get so good at what they're doing. And so, for example, one that I think is really common is the Beatles. He talks about the Beatles and how they started from just a band like every other band and made it to this worldwide sensation. So Outliers tells a lot of different stories of people top in their field and how they got there. And I think, Malcolm Gladwell does a pretty good job of appealing to all readers. So if you are pretty worried about reading nonfiction and not sure if you're going to enjoy it, these Malcolm Gladwell titles, specifically Outlier, really enjoyable. Mm-hmm. Highly recommend. Next is Parkland. And so, of course, you might be like, oh my gosh, is this the Florida school shooting? And so, yeah, it is, but it's not actually about the school shooting. It's not about the shooter. It's not about school shootings in general. This book is about the young people who survived the school shooting and how they took their experience and turned it into activism and political advocacy and actually organizing some of the largest rallies that we've seen in our country, some of the bigger movements we've seen in the last few years, and how these teenagers led that. So I think, if anyone's really inspired by the activism and the protesting and everything that's going on right now, you might consider reading Parkland and looking at how teenagers are leading some of the top movements in our country. Next, I'll swing way to the goofy side. So this, We Should Hang Out Sometime, is by Josh Sundquist. So Josh Sundquist is a motivational speaker. He's pretty funny. I don't know if you've ever seen the videos of the guy with one leg doing different Halloween costumes that he can really pull off because he only has one leg. Like the lamp or the candle from Beauty and the Beast, or he's Tigger and his leg is the tail that he's bouncing on. So anyways, he had cancer as a child, and that's not what this book is about. He just mentions it a little bit, so you have, kind of the concept of him. So he had cancer as a child and lost one leg, but he became a Paralympic skier, healthy, happy, successful guy. This is not a sad story. This is about how he got to 25 years old and he's like, I've never really had a real girlfriend. So he actually goes through all his relationships with females over the years and kind of goes back and says, what happened? Why didn't we date? And he actually asks these women, the ones he can get a hold of. I think there's maybe a couple that he doesn't get a hold of, but he kind of just unpacks it. And, he kind of always chalked it up to the fact that he only had one leg. So he was a person living with differences and assumed that put people off. And what he finds out is a lot more simple, a lot more normal problems than that. So if you're into relationships, dating, even romantic comedies, this author's funny. This book is fun. It's a really enjoyable biography. Okay, Stiff. This is a very science-y book. This is The Curious Lives of Human Cadavers. So this book goes into when someone donates their body to science, what does that mean? What happens to these bodies? And it's not just medical labs for people learning to be doctors and they're dissecting bodies. It's not just that. And every chapter is a different scenario of how these bodies are used. So, like crash test dummies are not always just the plastic ones. They experiment with real bodies, crashes, explosions. The author visits a facility that studies how human bodies decompose under different conditions. So, like when crime scene investigators find a body and they can tell, okay, this is how long it's been buried, they can kind of have an idea of when the person died. That is due to the work of these facilities that study how bodies decompose in different conditions. So, like I said, this is very sciencey. I would say the author deals with it with also some degree of humor. So this one, I have 2 copies and it's regularly checked out. That's Stiff. Swing the way happier side again. So Marley and Me is the story of a family who gets a dog and the dog is poorly behaved, and kind of how having this dog and loving this dog, affects their family. And this is one of those books that people who don't even like to read, but they love dogs, love this book. My grandpa never read a book till he was in his 70s. I think this is the first one he read. So anyways, if you're a dog lover, pet person, you'll love Marley and Me. Okay. I can switch to unhappy. So Hunger by Roxane Gay. Roxane Gay is a female author. She is of Haitian descent, so she's a woman of color. She is also obese. And so this book, she is, the subtitle is A Memoir of My Body. She is talking about being an obese person out in the public world. And she's actually very public. She's very active on Twitter. She writes for, big media like New York Times. She does travels all over doing talks. And so she's talking about being an obese person and how she's treated, but she also gets into why she's obese, and she talks about pursuing weight loss, and it's really interesting. I do have to warn you that if stories of sexual assault are upsetting to you as a reader, I would not get into this book, because she does talk about a sexual assault experience that she has as a child. So that is Hunger by Roxane Gay. She's one of my favorite authors. This is definitely a sad book, but also super interesting personal story. Let's get into another author of color. So if you, like me, have been binge watching comedies on Netflix, and maybe you're a huge Tiffany Haddish fan now, her book, The Last Black Unicorn, is a biography. It's funny. And so if you are into her, you should check this out. Okay. My next one is a story about someone. So the author basically gets into investigating a serial killer, and she's trying to find this serial killer. So the name of the book is I'll Be Gone in the Dark, and the subtitle is One Woman's Obsessive Search for the Golden State Killer. Now, you might think, the Golden State Killer, have I heard that lately? And the answer is yes. They found him just in the last couple years. What's sad is this author died
not by the killer.
Tragically. No, not by the killer, but she died. I think she got sick and died suddenly. So anyways, this author died before they ever found him. So we know the end of the book from the news and stuff, and she never did know. This is also a book that if you're upset by sexual assault or murder scenes, she does get fairly descriptive in this book. But as far as the investigation and cooperating with police, trying to figure out, these cold case murders, this was from, I think, the 70s, 80s, and then he stopped. He went off the radar. They weren't finding any more, but he's one of the more prolific American serial killers. So this is a fantastic crime investigation book. Totally opposite. We have Mr. Rogers.
It is so totally opposite.
It could not be any more opposite. The Good Neighbor, the life and work of Fred Rogers. So, of course, Fred Rogers was Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, children's television. He was very into education of small children, and the importance of play, and of course his whole thing about being a good neighbor and being kind to others. And as our world looks at equity and diversity and anti-racism, it's amazing that we can keep going back to lessons and episodes of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood from 20, 30 years ago where he was up on that stuff. And so he's a man who, fought for the health and well-being and education of small children. Mm-hmm. And he did that through public television. So anyways, this is a fantastic biography about his life and his whole career. And so if you're interested in education and small children, or even television production, you might enjoy this book about Fred Rogers. Okay, and then we'll do one more unhappy and one more happy. So No Choir Boy. This is one that's about teenagers on death row, and each chapter is a different young man that the author gets to know their case and speaks to them and kind of finds out their side of the story. If you are someone who read or saw Just Mercy, I would say these two books go really well together. This one's not that long. It's a little shorter than Just Mercy, but I would say it has a pretty similar flavor. Like the Brian Stevenson, the lawyer who wrote and was portrayed in the movie Just Mercy, would love these cases, would take on helping these young men. So anyways, if you're into criminal justice, or I don't know, I can't remember how much this digs into race. This is a lot about teenagers and should they be treated that way by the criminal justice system. And the last one, of course, is a happy one, Little Princes. So this one is about it is told by the person who lived it, I believe, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is
like a
personal, a personal account of a young man who was taken by the issue of orphans in Nepal. And because of what's going on in that country, there's a lot of these children that are living in like group home orphanage type settings. And this American, as in his early 20s, his young adulthood, got into going over and volunteering in these homes and being a kind of a caretaker of these children. And his mission eventually grew to seeking out the families and trying to reunite these children with their parents, with their families. And so this is kind of telling his story of volunteering internationally. There's a lot about travel. There's a lot about child welfare and caring for children internationally. And so I would say this is kind of like humanitarian work is the broad category.
Yeah. And he's saving these children because people are so poor, they're selling their children.
Well, they think they're sending them for education.
Yeah, they're going for an education.
Yeah, a better life.
Right, that's what it is. And then he's like, no, they've been sold into like slavery and some and
human trafficking,
and then but then some of them end up in these homes,
and those are like
streets.
Nonprofit organizations are finding these children, saving rescuing them from bad lives, and then they're keeping them in these homes. And he's like, let's get these children back to their families and teach their families and their communities about not falling for these tricks, essentially.
It's a beautiful story.
Yeah, and it's really readable, I would say. So if you're interested in international travel, human trafficking, you would like this book.
All right.
Well, that's just a taste of 1 million topics.
Okay, so Mrs. Marion, how would I, if I am a student at home, how could I get one of these books?
So our next materials pickup here at North is on September 9th. And so I am going to have things all set up. I actually kind of do. We just need to share it out for you to go online, look up the title of the book, and put it on hold, and then I set it aside for you. I'm going to bag it up in a brown paper bag, write your name on it, and then at the materials pickup, I'm going to have a table of all the library requests, and you're going to walk in and grab the bag with your name on it, and it's, any of these books, any library books that you want that I can bag up for you. And then, of course, there's always the public libraries. These are super popular titles that you should be able to find at any Columbus or the Westerville Public Library. So if you need help requesting one of those, maybe it's easier for you to get to a Columbus Metropolitan Library or easier for you to get to the Westerville Public Library. Those, they're putting books on hold. You can drive up and pick them up without even getting out of your car. So if you need help figuring that out, I can help you get a library card. I can help you, figure out how to request books on there too. There is actually now on my website still a way for you to get in touch with me. So I know some of you might be used to just walking down to the library during lunch and check in with me when you get here. I'm still really want to do that. I still want to help you guys with your schoolwork and finding books. And so I have a form all set up that you can let me know that you need my help, and we can do a Google Meet. We can talk on the phone if that's better, and we can get this figured out that I can still help you find books, help you with your projects, kind of whatever you need.
Yeah, so Mrs. Marion helps us a lot with this class. We'll be talking with her later about our research project. That is something that she really helps us out with. And then, but if you're looking for a book, or you're like just kind of lost, you're like, I don't know what book to look for, contact Mrs. Marion. You could even just send her an email, and you guys can.
I'll send you the link to the forms. I have a couple forms that can walk us through it.
Okay, and she's a great resource to help you find the right book for you. All right, so there's lots of details about the 500-page limit in the directions, but basically, let's just use these as an example. So you read Choir Boys, which is
200 pages.
200 pages. Yeah, it's almost exactly 200 pages. Okay, so I have 200 pages. That means I need 300 more pages. So what I need to do is find another book that I'm really interested in, because I'm not really thinking about page numbers, but I'm really interested in. And so say I want to read the Little Princess book. So then that is 280 pages. So that gives you 482 pages. That's probably that's just fine. That is absolutely perfect. As long as you're just above 480, you're good. Okay. However, you need to complete both books. Now, if I read Choir Boy and then I wanted to read The Good Neighbor,
that's 360 some pages.
Okay, so you would have 563 pages that you've read for first quarter. Now, what happens to those 63 extra pages? They roll over to second quarter. So you start off second quarter with 63 pages. Okay, so each quarter anything over 500 rolls over. So even if you have 200 pages roll over, and then you only read 500 pages the next quarter, you still have 200 pages for third quarter. So they just continually roll over. So one of the things that we want you to really understand with this project is that you have to completely read the book. You have to read it, the whole thing, to get, even if it takes you over 500 pages, you have to finish the book.
Well, so what happens, Mrs. Stithoulis, if I pick up Ain't No Choir Boy and I don't like it in the first 20 pages? Like, not gonna work.
That happens to me all the time. I'm like, terrible. Don't like this book at all. So, as long as you've read 25 pages and you've determined that you don't like it, we will give you credit on it. So that takes us to, how do we assess this assignment? All right, so Mrs. Berrien and I do book talks, and we were going to give you two choices this quarter. You can do a Flipgrid, where you do the book talk and there's questions that you answer in your book talk, or you can do a live Google Meet Hangout. It's not called Hangout anymore. It's just Google Meet. Google Meet with Mrs. Berrien or myself, and you just have the book with you, and we talk about the book, and that is the book talk. All right. So if you don't like the book, you can take those 20 pages or whatever, set up a book talk with us, and tell us about those 20 pages. Tell us about why you didn't like it, and we will give you credit for those 20 or 25 pages.
And you could include that with because eventually you're going to read, you're going to find one you didn't like, so then you're going to have to look for one you do like. And so you can do those talks at the same time. You can say, so I started with Little Princes. Yeah. I read 20 pages. This was not for me. So I switched over to I'll Be There in the Dark, Gone in the Dark. Yeah, I'll Be Gone in the Dark. And you say that this was way more my speed. And so I read this one for this many pages. And then, we'll have the 20 from the one and then the entire of the other.
So speaking of book talks, I need my book with me, don't I, when I do my book talk?
You absolutely do.
Yeah, you have to have the book talk, because
I might want to look at the book. Sometimes I grab your, we're
not going to be in person, but you have to be able to read your passage.
Yeah, you'll say like, okay, this is a part that I really liked, or this is a part that I didn't like, or sometimes I might say, turn to page 52, show me that you're there, read the first couple sentences out loud to me, and then tell me what's going on that page. So those are kind of some of the questions that you can expect. I like to say, what's something you would take out of the book? What's your favorite part or something? And so having the book there is really the only way to answer some of those questions. So you need to make sure you have it.
Yes. And what else? What were some other questions that we always get about this? There's a deadline. It's the end of the quarter. And we're going to tell you, if once you finish a book, set up your book talk. Either do your Flipgrid or schedule a book talk with us, so that you just get it out of the way. But you also, if you're like me, I will forget. Like when we were talking about Little Princes, I'm like, yeah, they get sold. You're like, no, they don't. And I'm just like, oh, that's right. And like I will forget like details. So you want to have it fresh in your mind. So schedule that book talk or do that Flipgrid early, as soon as you finish the book. I don't think there's anything else. If you have questions, which we are sure that you have questions, you can contact either one of us. Send us an email asking questions, pop into office hours with a question, and we'll answer those questions for you. All right? Find a book that you like, that you're really excited about reading.
You don't have to get it from here.
Nope.
But you certainly can.
Mm-hmm.
You'll get it September 9th at Materials Pickup.
Yeah. So we'll have that link in the video. I want to be able to be like, the link is below, but who knows where the link is somewhere.
I can put it wherever you
We
want.
can put it wherever we want. The link will be in this video. All right. So have fun. Read some good books. We can't wait to talk to you and hear about all that you're reading.
Yeah, can't wait.
Can't wait.
My favorite part.
Yeah. And we get to know you a little bit better.
That too.
That too.
Yeah.
All right. See ya.